Ask the boardroom. Are you governing AI or just approving it? As enterprise leaders, we're always looking at new opportunities, weighing the risks, and making those big decisions. So think about this for a second. Would you ever, and I mean ever, greenlight a major new product line without first, really getting into the nitty-gritty of its supply chain? I mean, you got to know where your materials are coming from, right? What are the weak points? Where are the dependencies? That's just, basic smart decision-making 101.
It's funny, though, isn't it? We get so excited about AI, all this potential. It's like that next big product, that game changer. But, and here's the thing, we often forget to apply that same careful, rigorous approach that we'd use for a physical product. And by that, I mean really understanding the AI's own supply chain. What data is it built on? What are those algorithms doing? And crucially, what are the chances of things going sideways, having those unexpected outcomes? We got to be thinking about this stuff.
Absolutely, and you hit the nail on the head. It's all about understanding that supply chain of AI, and that's exactly what we're diving deep into today. We've gone through a ton of material, reports, guidelines, even real-world examples. We're looking at the AI landscape, specifically in ASEAN and Malaysia, to see how they're handling things, but also drawing on those international standards and trying to make this super practical for you.
Yeah.
You're busy, you're leading, you need the key takeaways.
Yeah, for sure. And if we take a step back and look at the big picture, the reason AI governance is so crucial, so timely, is because of, AI itself.
Right.
We're not talking about some fixed tool here. AI, as it's defined by the AIRMAP, is about a suite of technologies that enables machines to demonstrate intelligence, to adapt to new circumstances, and is used to amplify human ingenuity and intellectual capabilities across the broad range of challenges. That's a mouthful, but that phrase, adapt to new circumstances, is really at the heart of it.
Okay, let's break that down. Adapt to new circumstances. That's the game changer, right? AI systems, some of them anyway, they're not static. They learn, they change as they're used, meaning what an AI does today could be totally different tomorrow. That's not something we usually see with regular software.
Right, exactly. So you're in the boardroom, you're making decisions. Ask yourself, if our AI can change, evolve, how can we be sure that it's going to stay on track, align with our goals, with our operations, and crucially, within those legal boundaries, those regulations? And it's moving so fast. The MPC Forum materials, they really highlight this. The speed of AI adoption, it's unprecedented. It's about being proactive, having strong governance in place. It's about managing risk, being responsible. And that's not just about getting ahead. It's about staying compliant, keeping up with the rules, which are changing all the time.
So let's bring this home, closer to home, right here in Malaysia. We've looked at the AI scene here. How's it shaping up in terms of governance?
Yeah, so in Malaysia, it's really interesting to see the government really stepping up. You have key players like MOSTI, KD, and KCOMM all actively involved, and then agencies like MIMOS and NAIO doing a lot of the groundwork.
And what's the general approach here in Malaysia? Any key themes emerging?
I'd say the big focus is on national coordination, getting everyone on the same page. There's a recognition that effective AI governance isn't a solo act. It needs that joined-up thinking, that collaboration between government, industry, research institutions. It's a whole ecosystem. And the KRI report on AI governance, they did some great work identifying the main risks for Malaysia in this whole AI game.
Okay, so what are the big risks they're highlighting? I'm sure our listeners are keen to know this.
Yeah, so they break it down into three main categories. First off, there's the risk of being left behind, basically not adopting AI and missing out on all those potential benefits for the economy, for society. Then you've got the risks tied to, unsafe AI. Think unintended consequences, errors in the system, bias creeping in, the AI doing things we didn't plan for. And of course, there's the risk of someone using AI for bad stuff, malicious intent. That's a whole other can of worms.
So it's not just about having the tech, it's about being ready for it, being prepared to manage it.
Exactly. That readiness is key. And the KRI report, they emphasize this, the need to be ready on multiple fronts. Ready with those governance frameworks, having a workforce with the right skills, educating the public so everyone's on board, and making sure the resources are there to support all of this. It's a big task. And when it comes to regulations, they're suggesting an agile approach. So not just relying on legislation, the usual laws, but looking at guidelines, industry best practices, standards, a more dynamic approach to keep up with how fast things are moving with AI.
So we've talked Malaysia. Let's zoom out, look at the wider region. What's happening at the ASEAN level?
So at the ASEAN level, there's the ASEAN Guide on AI, Governance, and Ethics. Now, this isn't a hard and fast set of rules, more like a framework, a way to encourage trust in AI across all those different economies and societies in ASEAN.
Makes sense. So what's the main takeaway for our listeners, for those in leadership roles?
Well, one of the key points in the Ajin Guide is recognizing that trying to have a one-size-fits-all approach to governance isn't going to work. You've got to tailor those governance strategies, consider the industry you're in, the specific AI technology, how complex it is, and of course the risks involved. Each situation is unique. But even with that in mind, the guide does lay out some core principles, really important for anyone leading in this space. They're kind of a foundation for responsible AI no matter where you're operating in ASEAN.
Let's get into those principles then, the key takeaways from the Ajin Guide for our leaders, for our listeners.
Right. So first up is accountability and integrity. This goes beyond just figuring out who messed up if something goes wrong. It's about having clear reporting structures in place. Who's responsible for what throughout the entire life of that AI system, from the design phase to deployment, all the way through. And if something does go wrong, if there are unexpected consequences, those need to be documented, addressed, fixed. It's about building a culture of responsibility, taking ownership of your AI.
That makes perfect sense, especially from a risk management perspective.
Yeah.
So what's next on the list?
Okay, so we've got robustness and reliability. Can you rely on your AI to do its job consistently even when things get messy? Unexpected data, errors popping up, tough conditions. Your AI systems, they've got to be dependable. They need to be able to handle those curveballs and still give you consistent results so you can prevent harm, avoid those operational hiccups.
So this is about how resilient the AI system itself is.
Spot on. Then you've got risk management. The Asian Guide is really big on this, having a proactive, comprehensive approach. You need to identify those risks early on, financial, reputational, ethical, legal, the whole spectrum. Then you've got to figure out how to mitigate those risks at every stage.
This is all sounding very hands-on, but I imagine the human element is still absolutely crucial here, right?
Couldn't agree more. Human oversight and intervention is a big one. You can't just let the AI run wild. You need to make sure there's appropriate human involvement in those decision-making processes, and people need to be able to step in safely to disengage the system if things are going off the rails.
Makes sense. Now let's talk about the data itself, the fuel that powers AI.
Yeah, absolutely. The guide is very clear on the importance of data quality and bias mitigation. We all know garbage in, garbage out, right? AI is only as good and as fair as the data it's trained on. So you've got to make sure that training data is representative, that it's accurate, and that you're constantly checking for bias, for unfairness. Otherwise, you're going to get skewed results, potentially discriminatory outcomes. Nobody wants that.
And I imagine this is an ongoing challenge, given the biases that can be baked into historical data.
It really is. It's not a one-and-done thing. You need to be vigilant, carefully curate your data, constantly monitor how the AI is performing across different groups, and if you find bias, you got to fix it. And those who are developing these systems need to be upfront about where that data is coming from. Transparency is key.
So how do we, as leaders, how do we gain that confidence, that trust in how these AI systems are making decisions? They can be so complex, almost like a black box.
That's where transparency and explainability come into play. Now, it might not always be feasible to understand every single calculation the AI is making, especially when they get really complex. But the guide is all about providing those users, those stakeholders, with enough information so they can understand how the decisions are being made. And that builds trust. Sometimes it's about providing implicit explanations, highlighting the factors that had the biggest impact on a recommendation. Remember that ucare.ai example, Algo Expectiem. They're building in explainability into their financial predictions.
So it's not about giving people a technical manual, but giving them enough clarity to understand and to trust the system, right?
Yeah, exactly. And last but not least, the Asian Guide really emphasizes the importance of monitoring and revalidation. These AI systems, they're not set in stone. Their performance can shift, it can improve, or, it can get worse over time. Data changes, the world changes. So you've got to keep an eye on those performance metrics and regularly reevaluate them, feed them new data. That way you can catch any issues early on and make those improvements. And actually, the expanded Asian Guide on generative AI, they go deeper into this, especially because Gen AI comes with its own set of risks. Think about things like generating inaccurate information, the potential for deepfakes, issues around intellectual property, privacy, and then the possibility of amplifying existing biases. That's a whole other discussion.
Let's make this even more concrete. Earlier, we touched upon biased AI in the HR space. Could you paint a picture of how that might play out, in a real company, and tie it back to those governance principles we've been discussing?
Sure. Imagine you've got an AI system in your HR department and it's screening job applications. Let's say the historical data that was used to train this AI, maybe it unintentionally overemphasizes certain keywords or past work experience. And maybe those things are more common in applications from a particular demographic. Maybe that's a reflection of past hiring practices. But the problem is the AI might then unfairly rank or filter out qualified candidates from underrepresented groups. That goes completely against the Ashian Guide's principles on data quality and tackling bias. And if there's no accountability, no way to check the AI's performance to correct those discriminatory outcomes, well, you're opening yourself up to some serious reputational damage, potential lawsuits, and you're likely missing out on top talent. It's a lose-lose situation.
That's a really clear example of how easily bias can sneak in, and if you don't have those governance procedures in place from the start, how that can have huge consequences.
Mhm.
Now, we've covered those national and regional guidelines and principles, but what about more formal frameworks? What role do international standards play when it comes to strengthening AI governance within organizations?
Yeah, great question. International standards are really valuable. They give you that global perspective on how AI is being used and managed. For example, you've got ISO IX DTR 2020-26, which focuses on the environmental sustainability of AI systems. Then there's ISO IX DTR 2040-30, which is all about different AI use cases. It's a really useful catalog. And, even those standards about sustainability and the circular economy, like the ISO 59000 series, they could become super relevant to how we design and manage the life cycle of AI, thinking about its environmental impact.
And what about beyond those kind of global benchmarks?
Well, you also have these voluntary frameworks that offer practical guidance. The U.S. NIST AI Risk Management Framework, they call it AI RMF 1.0, is a great example. It gives organizations a step-by-step process for developing those risk-based AI governance strategies and internal policies. Singapore's AI Verify is another good one. It's a testing framework to help organizations assess and validate how they're governing their AI systems. So they're really useful tools to translate those abstract principles into something concrete, something you can actually implement.
So let's get down to brass tacks. For our listeners, those leaders out there, what are some of the practical, immediate things they should be focusing on when it comes to AI governance in their own companies? What are the first steps?
Well, the first thing is to have clear internal policies, guidelines, the whole nine yards. Lay out how AI is going to be developed, how it's going to be used, and how it's going to be governed within your organization. The national guidelines on AI governance and ethics in Malaysia are a good reference point. And of course, data ethics has to be front and center. Protecting data privacy, ensuring security, that's non-negotiable. And you've got to stay compliant with the law, things like PDPA. Getting informed consent for data usage, having those robust security measures to prevent breaches, those are table stakes in this game.
It's all about responsible use, right?
Yeah.
And what about the people actually using the AI, the consumers, interacting with those AI-powered services and products?
Absolutely. When it comes to consumer protection and AI, you have to prioritize fairness, transparency, make sure there's a clear process for people to get help, to get redress if something goes wrong. Leaders also need to put in place ways to measure how well their AI systems are performing, conducting thorough impact assessments to really understand those wider consequences for the business, for society. And don't forget those ongoing monitoring mechanisms. You got to be on the lookout for bias, unintended effects, and course correct. The KRI report, they make a good point about independent oversight as well. Bring in different perspectives to keep an eye on those potential negative impacts of AI. Make sure you're not in an echo chamber.
All good points. Any common pitfalls, any traps that companies should be aware of, try to avoid when it comes to AI governance?
Oh, definitely. One of the biggest ones is getting caught up in the hype, jumping on the AI bandwagon without really thinking through your strategy, why you're using it, how you're going to manage it. Another one is not thinking about scale long-term maintenance. Implement an AI solution without considering how it's going to grow, how you're going to keep it running smoothly, and you're going to have problems down the line. And I think, and this is a big one, some organizations just don't keep up with those regulations. They're constantly evolving, and if you're not paying attention, you could end up with major compliance headaches. It's just not worth it.
So to bring it full circle, back to that analogy we started with, governing AI, it's not just about saying yes to this exciting new technology. It's about getting deep into those details, understanding that AI supply chain, the data, those algorithms, what could potentially go wrong. You need that same level of rigor, due diligence, that you would apply to any other critical part of your business.
I'd agree with that. And here's a thought for our listeners to take away, something to really consider as you're integrating AI more and more into your operations. Ask yourself, are you actually in control? steering the ship, ensuring responsible innovation, or are you just along for the ride, letting the AI take you wherever it wants to go? Now's the time to be honest with yourself about your AI governance strategies. Are they up to scratch?
And for those who want to delve deeper, to learn more, I highly recommend attending the MPC May Forum 2025. It's happening on the 26th of May in Kuala Lumpur. They'll be diving deep into frameworks like CPM AI and sharing practical advice for establishing effective AI governance, the kind that works in the real world.
It's going to be a great event.
And to wrap things up, being proactive, being informed, when it comes to AI, that's not just a nice to have. It's essential if you want to navigate the future responsibly, if you want to achieve success that lasts.
Couldn't agree more.
And on that note, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.